Hello everyone and welcome back into another video, and this week's daily race C was definitely an interesting one. P10 in the world with this lap time. Of course, it's only Wednesday and I know it's gonna go down. So P7 in daily race B as well. So I would really like to explain what exactly happened and just to kind of show you what exactly am I thinking about when I'm racing, and of course how I achieved those top 10 times. So I would really like to begin with this race. As you probably know, if you start at the back, or basically if you just start in daily race C, it's going to be an absolute mess, as you probably could have witnessed right here. So the first couple of corners are crucial, and it's definitely important not to pick up a penalty or not to pick up damage, but in this case of course I picked up damage from the front and from the back, so it was actually quite a mess. So the start wasn't really that great, but somehow I managed to get a couple of places directly from the start. So here we're running in P11, and all of a sudden I can see even more carnage starting up in the front, and I know if it goes on like this I will definitely pick up a couple more places, but my goal here is to just avoid getting pushed wide, and of course just to get into the pits in lap 1 to avoid all of the traffic, and eventually just stay out in clean air with most of my race. So I'm just going to say that the point is to stay in clean air as much as possible, otherwise you're losing a lot of time, maybe sometimes even a second per lap, which is pretty significant. So running into the pits, I was P9 at this point, not changing the tires, not refueling, so just doing the mandatory stop as in requirements of this race. And now we are in P10, but crucially I am in front of some of the guys that are a little bit slower than me at this point. So it was very important to stay up in front in some clean air and eventually just use the battery in the best way possible. This is another segment while you're racing with hybrids, and it's incredibly important. Of course I'm going to be talking about it when I'm doing my top 10 lap, but you can of course see it here. So just getting a couple of places throughout the pits, and you can see how am I activating the battery. So straighten up the car, third gear, and the wheel needs to be straightened up to activate it and to get that acceleration boost from the battery itself. This is very important because you can pick up, I would say, even half a second if you're doing this. So if you're not activating the battery, if you're not straightening up the wheel, and you can see here that I'm always trying to get it straightened up, run over the curb, and then again I find the spot, I just aim for that spot, and then the battery activates. And this is why I really love Gran Turismo. So I almost lost the car, I don't even know how I recovered it, but of course I ran wide, and what happens? It's a half a second penalty, because GT7. Yeah, I really do not have an explanation for this one. So it's just running off the track and then losing time, and on top of that it's a half a second penalty. But somehow I managed to defend this place, managed to stay in P6, and well, it all came down to lap 14 where all of the other guys had to pit. So I think the best strategy was always to pit in the first lap or pit in the last lap. It really depends on where you started, but it was actually a pretty decent race despite the mistakes, despite the penalty, with like a couple of situations that I had. But good, it was really good, P3, but I knew that from this point I can do so much better. I know I got the pace in this car and know that I can stay with the top guys in here, and I definitely knew that if I activate the battery in the right way I will eventually get the top 10. So it was actually quite frustrating because I was always like half a tenth up, half a tenth down, so it was really a struggle to get in here. So 50-meter sign is my first braking point. I'm trying to slow down the car in the straight line as much as possible, and then starting to trail brake and downshift into first gear, and quickly, I just say quickly, in third gear, abuse the curbs, really abuse the track limits, and here straighten up the car as soon as you possibly can. I know I lifted in here, but it was really important to activate the battery, and I know there is definitely a tenth and a half, 2 tenths, maybe even 3 tenths in this lap, but it just has to be perfect. So here on the right, this is our next braking point. I'm braking in the straight line, looking at the 50, and then as soon as I pass the 50 I always know like I need to start turning in, use the inside of this curb and accelerate in 4th gear to really get that rotation out of the corner, and then, you know, straighten up the car, ride the curb as much as you can, and then eventually once again straighten it up to activate the battery. So 50-meter sign, once again in here, so we need to kind of press the brakes just about 50%, a little bit more in this case. Don't hold the brakes, otherwise the car will run wide, so you will get a lot of understeer if you stay on the brakes. So just release the downforce, will do the trick, and then it will eventually help you to turn in the car. Same thing here. If you stay on the brakes for too long, you will eventually get a lot of understeer. I think here this is exactly what happened. I kind of missed the apex. I missed it slightly. It wasn't much, but I missed it slightly. I know I could have done at least 20-30 thousandths of a second faster. So here we got the curb again. Just a tap on the brakes, nothing too long, just a tap to slow down the car. Third gear on the way out. You can see that I'm holding it just about 85%, and this is what it takes to not spin the car and eventually get the rotation and activate the hybrid. So here we're looking at the curb once again. I'm trying to go wide, but not too wide, because we need to stay close to the curb, even touch the curb maybe. And then again, I'm trying to hold the power just at about 85%. I really tried it. I don't think this was perfect, but it was actually pretty good. So here, and this is the one where I just don't have a reference, and unfortunately this is where you can eventually lose time. So I'm trying to brake in the straight line, release the brakes and get the inside of this curb, fourth gear, and before the apex start accelerating to get that speed on the straight. And you can see battery did activate, and I think in this case it really activated perfectly, so I was able to pick up, I think, even a tenth and a half, maybe tenth and a half from the last corner. And I crossed the finish line and it was 18.7. So in general, it was a pretty decent lap, but I think there is a lot more in this one. And it was P10, just P10. It's not like P5, P6, P10 in the world. So all in all, I can say that I'm pretty happy with the race. And then daily race B happened, and I think this is actually the star of this week. Racing, in my opinion, is a lot better in here, unless you start at the back, which usually is a bit of a mess. But I'm starting in P3 in here. I only did like a couple of qualifying laps before this one, and I think I did 2 races before this one, and both races were actually pretty good in my opinion. So we are racing here, and I really tried to take the most out of this car because we were running setups in here, and I know that with the setup this car can be incredibly twitchy, and this was a qualifying setup. So of course setups you can find in the link down in the description, but the point was to get this lap down in the qualifying, and just when you're in P1 it's much easier. Of course you got some clean air, you can push, and you know, you get a pretty decent margin over the other guys. So I just stayed here in P3, nothing much has happened, but then I realized I was actually getting a lot of time in this chicane, which is usually the worst part of this track, and I cannot even explain how much time I spent in here trying to get my lap time down. So it was a perfect lap, or close to being a perfect lap, and all of a sudden you get into the chicane and it's over. You just lose half a second and you have no idea why. Or the car spins out and you completely lose it. So those are the 2 possible scenarios. Or you hit it just about right and then you get half a second and you really don't know how. So yeah, we got a couple of scenarios that can work, but I realized that I don't have to push in that corner that much. I just have to stabilize the car, release the brakes, and then eventually, you know, kind of move the car around without putting the power down too hard. So it was very important to stabilize the car, especially in these high-speed sections and over the curbs, because this car was incredibly twitchy, as you probably can tell. Nicholas almost losing the car in here, and I think this was quite an experience, because then I was just about half a second to the guys up in the front, and I knew this is gonna go too wide into the bus stop, and it's not possible. But okay, they're running very, very close to one another, and I think there is a small chance to pick up something. I knew that always in this situation, when someone goes or tries to go for a move, there's always something. And Goncalo went slightly too wide over the curbs, and I know in this situation it's actually really difficult to stabilize the car if you don't have a good angle. So I really decided to send it, and I did on the inside, but he's got a pretty decent run on the outside of this corner, and eventually got myself the fastest lap of the race, even though we were fighting. But either way, he's on the outside, and I know that Renault has incredibly good acceleration and it can turn, I know it. But I kind of stayed on the inside, and I think he gave me a little bit too much room in there, but all fair, all good. I managed to get myself into P2. So I knew that I had some pretty decent pace in here, and I know the car is rotating, and I know that of course it can be much faster if I just get that perfect lap done right, because there is always something in this. It's always that a bit of rotation that you're not getting, or just a little bit extra rotation that you don't necessarily need. So I'm running in P2, I can see him behind, but somehow I got away. Especially it's the bus stop, usually is bus stop, where I can pick up a little bit more time if I stabilize the car, and that's exactly what happened. One wrong move from him and it was half a second down, and eventually I got my lap down to 54.6, which was a pretty decent lap for the race, especially if you account for tires and fuel. And of course, as I said before, someone loses in the bus stop, but now in the last lap I almost lost the car, but I managed to get it done right. And then 54.6 in the race means that I can definitely get a couple more tenths in the qualifying. Not a couple more tenths, like a little bit more than that. I was thinking about a second. But my qualifying lap was slowly getting down. 154.0, it was previously 154.1, but now I knew there is definitely something more than I can get. So our first breaking point is the 100 meter sign. So we are using the full potential of the track, full width of the track there, standing very close to the curbs, but I do not want to touch the curb with this setup in this car. Otherwise it will get too much rotation and it will actually slow down the car. So here I'm using this reference on the right just to tap the brakes slightly. You can see that I'm not exceeding maybe 15-20%, if that. Third gear on the way out, and then we are just trying to use the full width of the track. You can see that I'm going very, very wide, and then I kind of have a reference in here, but I know that I don't have the trail brake too hard, otherwise I will lose the back end. So I'm just trying to use that one downshift, get onto the curb, accelerate really, really quick, because that will help the back of the car move, and then just lifting a little bit, third gear on the way out, stabilizing the car, not losing. I almost lost a bit of time, and you can see that I'm actually losing a little bit of time on the exit, but I stabilized the back end, so it was, in the end, it was pretty good. So here, this is our next reference, and it was incredibly important to rotate the car under downshifting. You can see that when I downshift, the back of the car starts rolling into the turn, and then eventually I'm getting more rotation. So this is gonna be incredibly important in the next couple of corners. So here, full on the brakes, I'm going to downshift into second and quickly upshifting into third and full power out. So with the LSD settings the way they were, I think the acceleration sensitivity was at 60. So I could have done a full acceleration or really, really quick acceleration in third gear and not getting a spin, which is actually quite weird, but it worked. So here we are looking at the curb, braking in the straight line, downshifting into first gear, and this is what I'm talking about, getting that rotation in first and quickly in third gear, because this will give us rotation and the grip necessary to get out of this corner. In second, I need to be careful, but with third, I don't have to. I just can put the power down and I don't even have to worry about it. Here, this was a little mistake, because usually you would run this one flat out. So I lost a bit of time in here. Potentially in this lap, I could have got a little bit more, maybe like even a couple of tenths more. But we are running into our next reference, which is usually the tree on the right, downshifting in the second gear, getting that rotation, third gear on the way out, flat out. You don't have to worry about if you put the power down in third. And then again, I'm trying to find the reference here, which is usually on the left hand side, downshifting to get the rotation, third gear on the way out. So this was incredibly important to run over the curbs and use the full width of the track, use the full potential. And this lap was looking incredible at this point. It was just like a couple of tenths quicker than my previous try. It would have been a top 10, but then we got the bus stop, and in this one it was actually a pretty decent one. So 110, 100 is usually my reference point, and then turning in, but you can see that I'm trying to stabilize the car while releasing the brakes. You can see release the brakes and just going over the curbs, using the full potential of the track. I think you can eventually go a little bit wider, and third gear on the way out. You can see that I'm fighting the car, and this is what is necessary to get the most out of that bus stop. And I know it's difficult, but it's, you know, it's supposed to be done. Here, looking at the cone on the right side, first gear rotating the car, and then once again third gear, just to get a little bit more grip and use once again the full potential of the track. And in the end, it was a pretty good lap, a 53.5 with a couple of tenths more than I can potentially get. So P7 in the world. And of course, if you would like to find out more about the things that I usually do to get quick, you can go check out my online course, which is going to be down in the description. So once again, guys, thank you very much for watching, and until the next time, bye.